Thank you. So it's me again. And so I'm doing this off a screen, so I don't get to see your faces while I'm doing this, and it's very odd to preach to a screen. But we want to start this morning in Jeremiah, this passage that Sam just read. And because it's such a great passage of hope. It's like someday, right? Someday things are going to be better. And in Jeremiah's day, he's not dealing with COVID-19 where he's being asked to stay at home. He's stuck in a city surrounded by an army that is about to come and level the city, and they don't know what is next. They know that many people are going to die. They know that horrible things are about to happen. They know that the best outcome is for their city to be destroyed and for them to be taken off in captivity. That's their best outcome. Jeremiah himself actually ends up running in the opposite direction. Many of the leaders in Jerusalem, they get taken away to Babylon. So northeast, if that helps you at all. But he runs away. Well, he doesn't actually run away. He gets taken by force by some supposed friends of his off to Egypt. So that's his best scenario, is being grabbed and kidnapped and taken to Egypt, which again is better than being slaughtered, but far from ideal. And in the middle of all of this, God gives this word to Jeremiah that says, no, someday things are going to be new. Someday things are going to be different again. So we start with where folks are, right? This is a story that says, here's where we are, and then here's where we want to be. And so it's always good to start in the local, in the particular. Here's where we are. And well, here you are at church, except you're not at church, and you're looking at a screen, and it's all it's all as strange as it is. So here's the problem, and the question then is, well, what is God going to do about it? That's sort of my task this morning, to tell you that, and it would be nice to know that. It would really be great to have a message for you today that says, oh yeah, by the way, I've got the answer for you. I know what God is going to be doing in the next while. So here it is. But that's not going to happen because I'm the pastor, not the prophet of this church. But we do have resources. So we also read the Matthew passage this morning. And you may have noticed that we read from Matthew chapter 28 this morning. And I don't know if you remember all the way back to last week, because there's been a lot of stuff happened between last week and this week. But last week, we read from Matthew chapter 21, which means that we've missed like the rest of 21 and 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26, and sort of jumped ahead to 28. And that's a lot of stuff to skip. And it's not just all the story of Good Friday. There's actually a lot of other things in there, right? So then after the Good Friday story, after Jesus comes into Jerusalem, he goes into the temple and he does what is traditionally called the cleansing of the temple, right? Which is sort of in modern language, direct political action to challenge the religious authorities of his day. So he goes in there and says, no, what you're doing in the temple, what you're doing in this site is wrong. We need to change it. Get out of here. We're going to fix it all. And then he goes on to teach. He goes on from there to teach. And basically, it's a series of parables, and they're all about the replacement of the current leadership in Israel. Now maybe if he would have had like one parable about that, people would have gone, well, it's a parable. You can sort of interpret it various ways. We're really not sure what this all means, so we'll just let it slide. But after sort of the second or the third parable, basically on exactly the same theme of how the current religious, economic, political leaders of Israel are going to be replaced by God, people would have caught on. And he goes on from there to challenge the taxation system itself, right? That he gets challenged on should we pay taxes to Caesar And his answer is, pay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And traditionally, that's interpreted to mean, well, then we should be paying our taxes. But that's not what Jesus says. What Jesus says is, you have to decide what it is that belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God. And if you believe that 10% belongs to God, then you've got 90% left for whatever you want to do. But if you believe that it all belongs to God, then what's left for Caesar? Right? So you have, potentially a tax revolt going on here. He follows this with another long speech about the religious leaders of his day. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. This is all of what is today chapter 23 of Matthew. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, blah, 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 over and over. And after that follows this apocalyptic teaching about the world that is coming, this new thing that God is going to do. So there's all of this energy and sort of, this amazing speech about this new thing that is coming, and it's all climaxes in the story of the sheep and the goats, right? So this is the final judgment when the Son of Man returns to judge us as human beings. And the only criteria Jesus says that he's going to use is how we care for the least of these, right? Not about how often we went to church or how religious we were, or how we treated our friends. Just only about how we treated the least of these. So it's hardly surprising that after a speech like this, he ends up in a lot of trouble and, of course, dead. It also gives us a maybe surprising new answer to the question, what would Jesus do? And that at least part of the answer to the question, what would Jesus do, is Jesus would have started a revolution. And it's really interesting to think about this in the context of Matthew, because we've been studying Matthew's gospel this last while, and Matthew is generally considered the least revolutionary of the first three gospels, right? That Mark is basically just sort of social revolution from start to finish, and Luke says, well, no, really, it's all about money. When it comes right down to it, it's the economy, stupid, is what Luke says, and by the way, you've all got it wrong. So Matthew's usually considered the conservative religious one of the bunch, and yet he ends with just sort of solid social revolution. So then, right, after all of that, of course, Jesus dies, and then we get to chapter 28. And chapter 28, each of the Gospels tells this story of the resurrection significantly differently. They're not little subtle differences, they're big ones. So we have to pay attention to what each of them is trying to say. So after the Sabbath, at the first day of the week, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. So it starts out really quiet. They're going, just two women. We don't know who the other Mary is. It might be Mary from Mary and Martha, or it might be Mary, Jesus' mother. All we get is the other Mary. And they're just going to see. It's all very quiet. And then, boom. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descending from heaven came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. Right? So this is all big production stuff. This is not the kind of thing you could do a quick little sort of church pageant about. You'd need the whole 3D special effects thing going on here. Right? So this is the biggest Easter story of them all, with the earthquake and the lightning and the angels and all of this, right? And the guards falling down like dead men. We're not sure in the story how much of this the women actually see. They may have, like how close were they? They were on their way, but presumably. Right? It's fairly reasonable to assume they've seen at least some of this, right? Because it goes straight into the next verse, which says, but the angel said to the women, do not fear, right? First thing always comes out of an angel's mouth, do not fear. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said, right? Duh, he told you this, right? Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message to you. And that's right. That's the message. Right? The message is go and tell the disciples so that, so the guys can know too. And then he says, go back home. And then Jesus shows up and he basically says the same thing, right? Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There you will see him. So, right, this is a very good sort of COVID-19 kind of message for us. That, right, because Jesus says, go home. Go home, stay there, you will see me there. Jerusalem had its warning. Jerusalem did its best to try to end this revolution, wasn't listening. So it's time to go home and start there. Right? So our message for this morning, stay home. You don't need to go anywhere to find Jesus. We started this sermon by asking the question, here we are, what is God going to do? And the message that we've seen sort of walking through our texts is that God is going to work through ordinary folk like you and me to create something new. Jesus doesn't say go home and continue your life the way it has always been. He says go home, there you will see me. This is going to be something new. I know in a time like this, there's this longing inside of many of us to return to the old normal, just to get back to the way the things used to be. It's also important to remember that the old normal was corrupt, it was racist, it was earth-destroying, lots of bad stuff about the old normal. Right? As Christians, we should never want to go back. Back is not the direction, right? Home, yes. Back, no. So God has given us now this opportunity to hit the pause button in our lives. And that's sort of what it feels like to you. Like God is just sort of going, boom, let's hit the pause button for a while. Right? And now we have this opportunity to imagine something new. We can imagine something new for ourselves. We can imagine something new for our neighbors. We can imagine something new for our community. And this is what it means, I think, in the 21st century to be home and to see Jesus, and to imagine this new thing. Amen.